Welcome back to Champion News Talk Radio. We are brought to you by championnews.net, and we are your choice for the conservative voice and for truth. Before the break, we were talking about the union. And during the break, we were talking about the recent State of the Union our governor gave to us. And I guess my question is our State of the Union because of us being a union state or something like that? What have the unions done to this great state? Well, anybody?
Yeah, unions, first of all, government unions shouldn't even exist. I don't know how many people really know this, but government unions didn't exist until the late 50s and early 60s. Previous to that, even Saint FDR, the Democrats' favorite president, was against public unions. He said government unions are a horrible idea. And it was later passed into law that state workers could unionize. And what you have is you have a parasitic organization here. They feed off of the taxpayers.
Michael Brown says that all the time. Yep, yeah. Yep. And so, Michael, go ahead.
You know what's interesting? You say that because when I talked, I have a lot of friends in the private union, carpenters, laborers.
Yeah.
Highly respectable folks, right? Good blue-collar people. And it was interesting, this was over the summer, I was talking to one of their wives, and they look at the public union in the sense of they don't pay their dues. And it was interesting when she said this, I said, can you explain further? Well, we pay actually our dues once a month, right? The public union, the taxpayer, pays their dues for them.
Right.
And it made me think about that. It's a very interesting concept to think that way, but that's on the private sector. They're unionized.
Right.
Same type union, if you want to call it for what it is, but versus what a public sector union actually is true, because the taxpayers pay their salary. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, think
kind
of
an
it this
interesting
way.
way of looking at things.
A government union is antithetical to good government, and that's just a fact.
Yep.
Because what's a union's purpose? A union's purpose really is only to get as much money out of an employer as they can get. A union is not to improve the product. It's not to make their workers better. None of that. It is to take money from the employer.
And
now,
the employer is the taxpayer.
In a private situation, that is limited by how much money the company can make. It's limited by capitalism. But in a government situation, it's not limited at all. You know, the unions just continue to grab more and more, and we pay for it.
But aren't there more? Now, I know Illinois is a total, we have a lot more union workers than the other states. I get that, and obviously it shows that we're like the worst state in the whole country, California too. But I guess my question to you is, how many of the tax-paying citizens that are voters understand this conversation that we're having here today? How many tax-paying citizens actually understand and can articulate the differentiation between public sector and private sector unions?
I would probably say not many, because to most people, a union is a union. They don't understand. Well, and again, they don't understand the history I just related of the fact that there weren't government unions until our lifetime.
And you are
There's
correct.
Another
FDR.
factor in this whole thing is where do people get their information about the unions and so on. Well, if you go on the radio and you listen every once in a while, the unions get on there or somebody speaks for the union, and I'll tell you, it's the biggest bunch of lying crap I ever heard about anything in the public. Oh yeah, we're not going to hold back here because it is the truth. You're being told on the radio and by other means that the debt and all should be shoved back. Madigan, the guy that runs the downstate, the House, and all the Democrats, they say, well, we will shove the debt for the pensions back to the school districts where these people that are getting the pensions came from. Well and good, except that isn't the way it worked. They ran out of money at the local districts in 1995, and they shoved it up to the state, and then the union really got a hold of it, and they tied up 90% of the money that they took from the teachers has gone into the pockets of the Democrat Party. That's what's happened, immense amount of money. And so they've been on the air with television, and the news goes along. It's all for our kids. Baloney. Those guys have seized the future of your kids, and it isn't too good in this world about getting a job with what you're going to learn in the lousy public schools. I know, I'm an employer, and I run schools to make up for the deficit that job seekers have when we get them. We have to improve them because the school system left a lot of holes in what they learned. So they've got, if they take from the teachers $132 million a year. That's for the year 2010. This year is probably more. But of that, Beck decision says that 80% should go back to the teachers. Well, that's about $100 million a year. And it should go back to the teachers. They took it from them, and the Supreme Court decision, the United States, says that 80% of it ought to go back to the teachers. So we at Champion News are going to carry on quite a thing here to get that money back in the hands of the teachers. Because when it goes to Madigan and the Democrats, all they do is stick you with more teachers as they spread the graft around. I'm not accusing them of a felony here, but this political things they do would remind people of a racket of some sort. But $100 million a year going into Michael Madigan and the aggressive Democrats is very corruptive. And that's why we're $180 billion in debt just on the pensions, just for the teachers. So when you hear these things on the air and the way the newspapers generally print it, they print what the unions tell them. It's a bunch of lies. They are lying sons of guns. If you want to hear the truth, spend $10 or $20 and get this book, and you'll find out about the pension part of it. Because this is God's truth, and it comes right out of the teachers' retirement system at the state level. So if there's liars there, I don't know, but the truth comes out at the teachers' retirement system, because that's where the pensions are saying. So if they didn't report all that they earn, which will surprise you to beat hell what teachers really earn, if they didn't put it all in there, then they wouldn't get all of their pension. So it's all reported there, and the facts come from the state. In this case, they're accurate.
Well, I have to disagree with you here. I mean, our friend Governor Quinn had a great State of the State speech, and he said everything's fine. I was talking to Joe Walsh not long ago, and he says that Quinn went to
crap in town.
Exactly. Quinn went to D.C. to talk to the Illinois delegation, and he said the same thing there. Joe Walsh, former congressman here in the state, had told me that. He goes, we thought he was delusional.
Well, he gets away with it because the press has been very delinquent in this. I'll tell you, what started me to put all of the statistics on this on the internet was I read a newspaper article from the Daily Herald. A young reporter in the suburbs had written a story about salaries of teachers. I called her up and I said, the salaries you reported, you're very low. Their salaries are actually much higher. She says, well, I got them from the administration. I said, I'm not going to call them a liar, but they do disparage these things. I said, it's actually much higher. If you want the real truth, go to the TRS system at the state level. That's the one place they actually report what they make. She says, I don't have time to do that kind of research. So the penny dropped, and I got all that stuff from the TRS, and I got a couple of smart guys that knew how to put it in a system that anybody can go to, and you can find out the salary of any administrator or teacher in the whole state. You can find how much they're educated and what they're teaching in the schools. And I've been doing that for 15 years. So there's the God's truth of it. And when you hear somebody with a program on the air from the unions, you can bet it's a bunch of rotten lies.
And all that data is on championnews.net.
Yeah.
Folks can get all the teachers' data. And
for over 15
people get
years.
real mad. People get real mad at Champion News for putting that out there, and generally they're teachers. Now, Michael, you've been in contract negotiations.
Right. And one of the things I want to point out to you, Jack, is, first of all, you make a lot of good points, but you have to identify the problem to come up with a solution.
Absolutely.
And one of the problems that I've identified is, obviously, it's state legislation, how the laws are written. How are they written, labor laws specifically, okay? It's not fair practice. And to where you're going, Carol, is I just dealt with negotiations and collective bargaining firsthand, and one of the things I like to point out is one of the things that labor laws protect is allow teachers to strike. You don't see firemen, you don't see policemen striking, but why are in their public sector?
Right. We're going to go to...
There's a reason. Governor Thompson, a Republican, that stinker gave him the right to strike, which is illegal in most of the states.
You know what? We're going to talk more about this, Michael, and Jack and Warner when we come back after the break. Stay with us. It's going to be a great show.